I know this is a really long video and I appreciate that not all of you are going to want to watch it. This goes very in detail on events, so if you really want to know how to use them, you want to get the most out of this, you want to know, you want to be good at events, then I recommend watching this. But I'm also going to make a shorter version, maybe like 10 minutes, teaching how to use events, the basics, all you might need to know for now. So I'll leave that as a card in the top right corner if you want to go and check that out. I'll also leave a link in the description. I appreciate that you might not have the time or the willpower to watch this, fully get that, so I'm going to make another shorter video that tries to explain this in a shorter way. So thank you. Hello and welcome to episode number 10 in my scripting series. In this video we're going to be looking at events. Now, in the previous videos in this series we've been learning all about functions, variables, properties, all that good stuff. But this is where it starts to get more interesting and more exciting, because events are a very main and integral part of Roblox scripting and game development. They are used everywhere. In every game you'll be using events, and events are what help things happen in game. So for example, events allow us to trigger things. What an event does is it listens out and waits for something to happen, and when something specific does happen, what we can do is we can get our script to do something, to do an action when this event is triggered, when it listens out for something. For example, I could tell the script that whenever I step on a banana, then I could trip over it and fall over, and then when I do step on it, we fall over. So how have I been able to make the script listen out for that and know that when I'm touching that banana? Or for example, how can I do something when a player clicks a button? It's all thanks to events. An event listens out, waits for something to happen, and when it does, it triggers an action. So some real life examples are, for example, if you had an alarm clock, your alarm clock is constantly going to be checking the time, and let's say you want it to wake you up at 7 o'clock. Well, if the time is 6:58 AM, it's not going to set off. If it's 6:59, it's not going to set off. But when it gets to 7 AM, yeah, it's going to turn on your radio, it's going to wake you up. So it's constantly checking, constantly waiting for something to happen, for your alarm clock to reach 7 o'clock. When it does reach 7 o'clock, it triggers an action. The action being that it's going to turn your alarm clock on, it's going to wake you up. And with the button, when I click the button, it's constantly waiting to see if it's been clicked. And when it has, we can fire an action to happen. So events are all around us. If you turn on your computer, you click on the on button on your computer, it's going to trigger it to boot up. So it's the same in Roblox. We can make triggers. We can trigger things to happen in the game using events. So let me show you how they work. So they're actually quite simple. All we need to do is set up an event, and then we need to connect it to a function. Now, if you haven't already watched my videos on functions, you're completely new to this, I recommend you go ahead, watch them, so that you know what I'm talking about, else you might lose track. So I'll leave a card in the top right corner of the screen, and also a link in the description. I'm going to take this nice and slow as well, and I'm probably going to do a couple videos on events, because you might think they are a little bit tricky, but trust me, they are quite easy, and it just takes a little bit of practice. So I'm going to start off by saying about an object in Roblox. So you know that if you've been watching previous videos, you know that an object in a Roblox game, it has properties. So things like its colour, its transparency, its reflectance, whether it's anchored or not. So they are properties, and they define what an object looks like, or how it behaves in the game. Does it fall through the map if it's anchored? Can we collide with it, etc. So we have got properties. We've also got functions of objects, and we covered that last time in the inbuilt functions video, which I'll leave a card to as well if you're interested in that. And what that means is that an object can have its own predefined functions. For example, destroy. Destroy is a common function built into an object, or clone, or clear all children, as we looked at previously. But we also have another thing built into objects, and they are events. So we have properties, we have built-in functions, and we have events. And an event is something that will get triggered when something specific happens to that object. Now, to have a look at all the events available, there are loads of them that we can track and we can set up to trigger things. We're going to go to the object browser, so click on View and click Object Browser. Now, on the left panel here, these are all of the different objects available to us in Roblox, and on the right are all of their events, functions, and properties. So let's select a part because that is the base class, and we'll use it as an example. So let's see, P for part. Here we go. So I'm going to click on part, and you can see that we have our built-in functions. These are the pink icon ones. So we've got break joints. What that does is basically just makes a model or a group of parts, if they are welded together, they will just fall apart. We've said about clone and destroy. So these are the different things that we can call on an object to do an action, such as cloning it or destroying it, but we're not looking at that today. We've also got our properties, such as anchored, brick color, C-frame. These are the blue icons, so the things that change the parts, the object's appearance or how it behaves. And then at the bottom here, in yellow, we've got our events. And these are the ones with the lightning bolt. This is what we're going to be focusing on today. So we've got loads of different events here, and these are things that we can track. And what we can do is we can set up a listener. And a listener is basically waiting. It's code that will wait for one of these events to happen. So all of these lightning bolt things here are things that could happen for this specific object. And don't forget, these are predefined by Roblox. You can't make your own events that wait out for something specific to happen. So for example, wait for AlvinBlox to, I don't know, chat a message. Or you can, but you can't just have a really specific event like that. You'd have to have an event that's been already created, and then you'd have to do checks once it fires. But if we're just thinking about events that come, predefined, pre-made, built into an object, that's what we're going to be looking at today. And these are the ones that Roblox have built in to the part object, and ones that we can listen out for on a part. So we've got touched, and what that means is when a part has been touched by something, so maybe it's hit a player or they've stepped on it or something. Touch ended, which is when somebody has stopped touching or something has stopped touching a part. And we've got these other ones which we won't be focusing on yet, but these are the events that we can set up to listen out for. And when we set them up in our script, when we say listen out for, it means we're telling the script that when this event happens, when it's triggered, do something, because they will trigger themselves. The script will know when it's been touched, because these events that have been set up are constantly looking out for whatever it is to happen. So the touched event is constantly checking to see if an object has been touched, but we don't have to do anything else to determine if it has, because Roblox is doing it in the background. Because you might be thinking, oh well, how do I know if somebody's stepping on a brick or something? And that's why you don't need to check that, because it's already been made for us by Roblox, and that's why we've got the touched event. The touched event is going to be looking out for that. It's always going to be constantly checking. We don't need to do it ourselves. That's why it's built in. That's why it's a built-in event. So let's choose the touched event, and you can see I've set up a touched event here, and you might be thinking, oh my goodness, how am I supposed to understand this? But I'm going to walk you through it. Firstly, what we do is we get the part that, and we're focusing just on the touched event right now, but we're getting the object that we want to listen out for the event on. So in this case, we want when a player touches this banana peel, we want them to slip over. So we've got the script inside of the banana. So we're firstly getting the banana. So we're referencing it. So we're saying script.parent. Or we could say game.workspace.banana. That's what we're doing. We're getting the banana. And then When we have got the banana, I'm just going to write it again to show you. We do the dot, and like we have done before, it shows up all of the properties that we could choose. But we don't want to choose a property, we want to choose an event. We want to listen out for when this part or object has been touched by something. But we can also see down here that it's suggesting events. So we want to listen out for when the banana has been touched. So we're saying to the script, okay, right, we want to set up an event for when the banana gets touched. And that's what we've done, we've set up our event. But nothing's going to happen right now because we haven't told the script what we want to do when it has been touched, and this is where :connect comes in. So :connect is basically telling the script that when the event happens, when it gets triggered, because Roblox is the one that is triggering it behind the scenes, I mean it's checking to see if it's triggered behind the scenes. We're not the one that's constantly going, okay, have they touched it yet? Have they touched it yet? Because it's happening behind the scenes. As long as we've said script.parent.touched, or whatever the event is, Roblox is then, or just touched. I mean, if we've referenced it, I mean, you could say game.workspace.part.touched or script.parent. As long as you've referenced it and said the name of the event that you want to listen out for, Roblox will take care of that. Roblox behind the scenes will constantly check to see if your event has triggered. And that's the great thing about events. Just like inbuilt functions, Roblox is taking the work away from us. We don't have to be the ones constantly checking. Like with the inbuilt functions in the previous video, I said you don't have to be the one. If you're calling destroy, the destroy function on a part, you don't have to worry about getting rid of that object. You can just say :destroy, and Roblox takes care of it for you. It deletes it. So as long as we've said the event name and we have tied it to an object which supports that event, because not all objects do. If we take array value, for example, that doesn't have a touched event. So as long as the object has the event and you are calling it, then it will trigger. But we need to tell the script what we want to happen when it does trigger. We need to set up the action. So you have a trigger and you have an action. So this is where connect comes in. So connect tells the script, okay, when the event that you just said about happens, we need to run some code, right? So we can set up a function. And I've said before in a previous video, a function is predefined code that we run at certain times. A function, we could have a function, call it hello, and we can just print hello. This function isn't going to run until I call it, until I say hello, okay? So what we can do is we can set up our event to trigger this function whenever the event is fired, whenever it is, triggered. When somebody does step on that part, when Roblox sends the signal, because they're constantly checking to see if someone has touched it, when somebody has touched that part, we can fire a function. We can fire predefined code. So I've got my function. How do I connect it to that event? And there are two ways. Obviously, you just saw about 15 seconds ago before I deleted the code, how it worked. But there's two ways, and I'm going to show you a simpler way first. So we've got our game.workspace.banana or script.parent, doesn't matter what you say. We've got our part. We need to get the touched event again, because that is the event that we are listening out for. That's the thing that we want to trigger our function when the banana has been touched. And yes, it has to be called touched, because that is what Roblox have set the event's name. We can't do anything about that, so we have to say touched. So what we now do, we want to trigger the function hello when somebody touches the banana. So we say : connect, and then what we have to do when we say connect, we have to do brackets, because then inside of these brackets we can specify the function that we want to run. So inside of these brackets, after the connect, we're going to write hello. Now you may be wondering, do we put the brackets afterwards like we usually do over here? And no, you do not. You do not put the brackets afterwards like this. Do not do that, okay? if you do, it will not work. I will show you. I will play the game, and it says attempt to connect failed. Passed value is not a function. That is because we are calling the function. We are not actually passing the function up here. So we get rid of these two brackets or parentheses. Maybe a little bit confusing, but when you are doing connect this way, you just, with a predefined function, in this case, because this function has already been defined before we have set up the touched listener, we just give the name of the function, okay? So now, if we play the game, it is going to print hello when we step on the banana peel. I can, trust me, 100% it's going to work. There we go. I've stepped on the banana, and would you look at that? It has printed hello. And let's just go over why that's happened again. That has happened because we've set up a function called hello. It's going to print hello when we call it. And we've told the script, whenever the banana has been touched, whenever this event, which is which is basically, say, it's its own event, it's like a member of the part, because it's in the object browser, it's an event of that part object. When it has been touched, we are then, because we have connected the function hello to this event, what's going to happen is when the banana is touched, then it's always going to run this function, no matter how many times you touch it. If you touch it one time, it will run the function once. If you touch it 10 times, it will run it 10 times. You can see after the hello, it's got a ×7. That just means that it's printed the same message 7 times, but instead of flooding the output, it has printed it once and done a ×7 to show, just to shorten it down. But what that means is the function hello has been triggered 7 times because we stepped on the part 7 times. Now, it may just look like we stepped on it once, and okay, fair enough, we kind of did. But the reason it triggered 7 times is because the touched event will trigger when any part, no matter what, interacts with that banana, when it, touches it basically. And when we walked over it, all of my body parts were touching it at the same time. Let me prove it to you. If I select all of my body parts, you can see that my character is made up of loads of different parts: the left foot, left hand, left lower arm, torso, etc. You see all these different parts that are highlighted in blue, yeah? And I highlight the banana as well. Well, look, when I'm touching it, there are like what, 3, 4, 5 parts on it at the same time, and when I'm constantly moving, it constantly keeps touching the banana, so it's going to be running multiple times. And in a future video, we'll learn about how to stop that so that only it runs once, okay? But you don't need to worry about that for now. What you need to know is that the touched event, we have tied it to a function called hello. What you also need to know is that you must define the function. If you're doing this method, you must define the function before you set up the event listener. Okay, the event listener is this thing here. This is the event listener because it is listening out, waiting for that touched event to fire, to be triggered. Okay, when we say trigger and fire, it means the same thing. Just for context, when you step on the banana, it is firing the touched event. That touched event is getting sent off, it's being fired, then it's being picked up by this event listener, okay? So this is listening out, waiting for us to step on the brick. When we step on the brick, then we're triggering this, we're firing it. It means the same thing. But you can't have the function below the event listener because the script goes in steps. It works its way down, so it goes line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4. It hasn't seen line 6 yet because it hasn't got to it. We're at line 4. We're currently here. We were at line 1. We worked our way down to line 4. We're currently here. We won't move on to line 5 until we have executed and completed line 4. And on line 4, we're saying when the banana's been touched, connect, that's fine. But it's when we say hello, it's saying connect the function hello to the banana. But because the script hasn't got to line 6 yet, it hasn't even defined the function yet, it's thinking, well, what's hello? I don't know what hello is, hasn't been defined yet. So we're going to throw an error, and I'm going to show you that. We run the game, boom, attempt to connect failed, passed value is not a function. Of course it's not a function, it's a nil value because we haven't defined it yet. It's only a function when we define it later on. So you cannot set up the event listener until you have defined the function. If we put it below the function, it's going to work fine, a treat. But you have to make sure you have defined your function first if you're doing it this way. There's also another way to set up event listeners. It was the way I showed you when I first opened the script. I forgot to clear it. But what that method is basically when you want to set up a function on the fly, a function that you haven't already set up yet, but you can set it up in the connect. So it's kind of like you're setting them up at the same time. You're setting up your event listener and you're also setting up the function that's going to be fired, because sometimes you're not going to need to define a function. You might not want to because you're only going to use it for when this banana is touched. So I'll just show you how you do that as well now. So instead of saying hello, because that's no longer a function, it's not a predefined function anymore, we want to define our function in this line 4 in this connect. So we want to execute a function that that does not exist currently. So we can just say connect. Inside of here, we're doing the exact same thing basically, just creating a function. So what we're saying is when this banana is touched, we want to run some code, and we can just put our function inside of these brackets. Kind of just the same thing basically. I think they call it an anonymous function because we don't actually give it a name, whereas in the previous example we just gave it a name hello and then referenced it by putting hello in here, whereas in this case we're just putting the function in there. So we do function and then pair of brackets for our parameters, for our arguments. We'll get to that in a future video. Just like our parameters we did in previous videos, I'll leave a card to that in the top right corner in the description. So we create our function. Don't forget we still have to close this bracket off, but we haven't added our end in yet. So we add the end to close the function, and then we add a closing bracket, right? So what we've basically done is we've created a function, and any code that we put in here, so print hello, that is going to run. So what we basically, you can't just say print hello and put it inside this connect. It's not going to work. You have to put it in a function basically, because when you do a connect, the script always thinks that you're going to have a function in here, but actually you're not. You're going to want to run some code, so it has to be you might want to print hello, but it thinks that you want to run a function. And even if you haven't already created the function, you still have to put the code in a function like we just did here. But if we do it like this, so we basically just created our function, we've wrapped a print inside of it, and then we've closed it off with an end. Okay, it's not connected to these parentheses or anything, it's just a function, and the only difference is that we've not separated it with lines. So we could do this, right? This looks more like a function, right, that we've done previously, because it is a function. It's just a function without a name. We could give it a name, my func, but there's no point, and it's not going to work anyway because it's inside of this connect. So this is an anonymous function because it has no name, and if we run this code, it's going to print hello when we step on the banana as it did before. And the only difference is that we haven't given it a name because we don't need to, because we're not going to be referencing it anywhere, we're not going to be calling it anywhere else. We're only calling this function when the banana is touched. So that's what it looks like, but the way that we format this and the way that we lay it out and the way that you're supposed to write it is having the function up here, right, and then you put the end, you put the bracket after the end like this, okay? So it looks like this. You've got your game.workspace.banana.touched connect, then you've got your function, okay? You don't have two closing brackets, you only have one closing bracket here, and your last closing bracket goes after the end. Because if you think about it, you're creating your function, you're putting your code in there, then you're stopping your function, but remember, all of this code is still wrapped between these two brackets, so you've got your closing bracket on the end here and your opening bracket here to enclose this function. So what we've done is we've connected it to a function, that we haven't yet created. Well, we have created it. We've just told the function. What I'm trying to say is, instead of predefining the function like we did earlier with the function hello, we are telling it we want to run this code when the banana is touched. We're kind of doing it on the fly. We've set up a function so that we can just put some code in here, because you can't just put the code without a function in the connect, if you get what I mean. So basic rundown: we have referenced the part, the object. Every object has its own events that we can select by doing dot, and then all of them show up. We then do the name of the event. Once we've got the name of the event, we then have to connect it to a function. Now that function can already be made, right? We could have function hello, or whatever you want to call it, like this, print hello. And instead of saying connect function, we could just say hello like that. Or if we didn't need to create the function beforehand, if it only has one use in this event, we can just put the function in there. We don't need to bother with any of those function variable names or anything. We can just say function. In here we do the brackets for that function, for its arguments or whatever. Then we drop the line, and Roblox, it ends the function for us, and it puts that closing bracket to close off this connect. And then we set ourselves up so that we can put any code that we want to run when the banana has been touched inside of here. So we could say print hello. Okay, so what's going to happen is when I touch the banana, it's going to fire the touched event, but then we immediately connect that, because we've connected that touched event to the function that we created inside of the connect. It's going to run that function all the time, forever and ever. You can see I keep stepping on it. It's going to keep running that function. It's going to keep running that function to print hello. So there we go. An event is something that you can set up to run code when something happens in your Roblox game. Now, let's get back to what we were working on at the start. When a player touches the banana, we can make them sit down. Now, I haven't told you this yet, but because these events are Roblox made, they're predefined, they come with different objects, they're already created by Roblox, and they're done behind the scenes. Sometimes there is data passed between these events. For example, when something touches the banana, how do we know what has touched that banana? We might want to do something to it. For example, we might want to make them slip over. We might want to, if it is a player that has touched that banana, we want to make them slip over. So how do we know what has touched it, and how do we do something to whatever has touched it? Well, that is where the arguments come in. When we have these events that are pre-made by Roblox, they automatically send data to our function when they are triggered. So for example, when something touches the banana, the touched event will automatically log what has touched that banana part, and it will send it to this function as an argument. So we've got a preset argument that comes with this function. So whenever you do a touched event, there are some arguments that are passed. You can see, if we look in the object browser, it says event. That's just telling us what it is, what these things are. If I clicked on a property, it would say vector3 or the data type. So whether it's a surface type or a vector3, basically an int is a number. So that's the property type. If it's an event, it's going to tell you it's an event. If it's an instance, it's going to tell you it's an instance. But event, it says the name of the event that you have to say when you want to listen out for it. You can't just make up a name for your event, you have to use the one that's given. But then, in these brackets are the arguments that automatically get passed to your function. You create a function that gets run when the event is fired. That's fine. But also, there are going to be arguments that automatically get passed by the event, by the function, by the script, sorry, because Roblox has set them up to do that. When something touches the banana, the script is going to automatically pass an argument of the object that has touched it, and that is the other part. So the other part that touched the first part. Getting confusing, but if we think of the banana being the first part, the argument that's going to go in here is the part that touched it. You can call this whatever you want. You can call it part that touched it. Okay, you could call it my part. But it's always going to be the first argument, because it says here, it's the first argument. It's the first one, it's the only one, and it's called other part. You don't have to call it other part, that's just describing what it is, the data that gets sent to our function. But when an event is fired, sometimes the script will pass data to our function, because we might need to use that data. For example, we need to know the player that touched the part, so the script is going to pass the object that touched the part. Obviously it might not be a player, so it's just going to send the object. If a part touched the banana, it's going to send the object of that part. So usually when we're doing a touched event, we call this argument hit. That's just the standard that everyone uses. And just to prove this to you, because I'm going to show you that data actually has been sent, because it sends an object value, not like text or anything, it's going to send like an object. So for example, the banana, and then we'd be able to get its properties. So we could say hit.name. If I print that out when we step on the banana, and I know this video is getting really long, I'm sorry about that, but this is going to get really good in a bit. If I step on this, what's happening is I'm going to step on the banana, the touched event is going to fire, and then because we know that the script automatically sends data, an argument, to our function, the data type is an instance. That was what I was trying to say with an object. Whenever I say an instance, it means an object in the game. So like a part, or a model, or terrain, or camera. These are all instances, they're all objects. So it's going to send the object that got sent to that hit the banana. It's going to send that to the function that we created, and we're picking it up as the first argument. It's always the first argument. If you have multiple arguments, then it will put them in order and it will tell you which one to go first. So it would say, for example, if you had 3 arguments, it would have one here, one here, one here, but they would come in order. But luckily we only have 1 argument, so we don't have to worry about that. But it's passing the object that touched the banana. We obviously don't know what that object might be. We can't predict the future, so we give it a substitute name, hit for now, and then whatever that object is, whatever we've done to hit, it will do to that object. So we're printing hit's name. So if the object is my left leg, it's going to print out the name of my left leg, which is just left leg. As I said earlier, it's going to fire loads of times as multiple body parts are touching the banana. As I said, we have loads of body parts over here that all are going to be touching the banana at the same time. But anyway, let's just watch the output as I do this. It's going to print out all of the parts that are colliding with the banana, because it's going to constantly be firing that touched event loads of times. Here we go. As I keep walking into it, it's printing out the objects that are touching the banana, and it's firing every time you see a print. It's firing that event loads of times because it's constantly checking to see what's touching it. So we might have 2 things touching it at the same time, but it's going to fire the event twice. So it's not firing the event once for all of these different body parts, it's firing the event once for every body part that it's touching. And you can see I've stopped moving and it's triggered the event once, so it's not going to keep triggering it unless I move again, because I'm now still. My character is being animated, so some of the body parts are still moving, but if I start to touch it and stop moving, it's not going to register any more touches until I start moving again. But you can see what happens is the banana gets touched, it connects, because we've connected it to the function, it's firing this function and it's sending automatically the event data that Roblox has set up behind the scenes that gets sent. We're not telling it what to send. Roblox, when they make these events themselves behind the scenes and allow us to use them, they are telling us what data they will send when one of them is triggered. So these arguments allow us to do things when an event fires and get the specific things that are interacting with something. So this is just one event, and this may seem really confusing to you, but I'm going to try and make it as simple as I can. What we're doing is we're referencing the part that we'll get right. Sorry, we're firstly referencing the part, then we're getting the event that we're listening out for, that we want to trigger, that we're listening out for, okay? And then when that event happens, when it is fired, in this case when the banana is touched, what we've done is we've connected this event to a function that's going to run whenever the event fires. So whenever the banana is touched, we're running a function, and this function is used to define code that's going to run when the event fires. So when the banana's touched, we're going to run some code, but we can't just run some code without a function, so we have to create a function, and by doing that we can then have some data sent over to this function to tell us information about the event. So sometimes you will pass data from an event to a function, and that automatically gets passed by the script. We don't have to do anything. In this case, the object or the instance that touched the banana automatically gets passed to our function as an argument, okay? And then what we're doing is this function is going to run, and because obviously we have defined the function beforehand, before any of these events are fired, we're telling the script what to do when it's fired, but we don't know the objects that are going to touch the part yet, okay, because the game isn't running. But we know that when the banana is touched, then we know what is touching it, and we can do something with whatever's touched it. So the data is passed to a variable. This is kind of like a variable, and you can think of hit being the variable, but whenever we say hit, we're actually talking about anything that will touch the banana, because it kind of gets substituted. So if we think about my left upper leg, what's happening is it's printing out the name of the part that hit the banana. In this case, it was the left upper leg. So when the event was fired, when I stepped on it, it sent the left upper leg to this function, and it printed out the name of whatever hit the banana. In this case, it was the left upper leg. So I hope this is making sense for you. We will cover this more and more. It is a very, very confusing topic. I will make more videos on this, but I'm just trying to make this very simple and easy. But please leave any questions you have in the description. I will try and answer them in the next video. And your questions that you might be having, if you're watching this video in the future, might get answered in the next one. But you all want to know how to make the player slip over. Fair enough. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So we know that something's going to hit. We've got the hit. Obviously we don't know what that hit object is. It could be a player, it could be a part. And there are some properties that a player has that a part doesn't. So if I was to say, now let me just say, the part that's going to touch the banana, if I step on it, is going to be one of my body parts. It's not going to be my player's character model. If we look in the game when I join, my player is a model, but that model consists of loads of parts. When I step on this banana, it's not actually AlvinBlox that is touching it. It's not the model. It's the it's one of my body parts, so the left foot or the left leg, which is inside of my player object. So if I wanted to get the humanoid, which is how we make them slip, I would have to say hit.parent, because imagine that the hit was the left leg, which is inside of my player model. To get that player model, I'd have to say hit.parent. And if I say print hit.parent.name, then it should print the name of the body part's parent. So if the left leg or the left foot touched the banana, the parent of that part is AlvinBlox, and if we're printing out that parent's name, it prints out AlvinBlox. So we've just got my player model by saying hit.parent.name. So I could say hit.parent.humanoid, because the humanoid is inside of the player model. You don't really necessarily need to know how to do this yet, but the humanoid is inside of the player object, and to get to the humanoid from the body part, we have to say hit.parent to jump back up to the player model, and then .humanoid, because the humanoid is also in the player model. And then we can say .sit equals true, and that will make the player sit, and it will make them look as if they're tripping over the banana peel. So whenever I touch the banana, it's going to fire the event, and our function runs, which makes my body part's parent, the model object. It gets the humanoid, and then it sets the humanoid sit property, because there's a property of a humanoid called sit. When you do that, when you set it to true, it will make you sit, and if we step on the banana, you can see it makes me sit. So there we go. But obviously we can't predict what is going to touch the banana. For example, a part could touch the banana, but a part doesn't have a parent, and it doesn't have a humanoid either. So and it doesn't have a sit property in the humanoid. So if I made this part fall on the banana, it's going to cause an error. Let's unanchor it and see what happens. Anchored, blah blah blah. I need to make. What's happened here? Why isn't that? Oh, it's a trick. Look at that. That's beautiful. It looked as if it was on top of the banana, but it wasn't. But let's make it fall onto the banana and see what happens. Okay, humanoid is not a valid member of workspace. So what's happened is something has touched the banana. In this case, it's the block, and it's triggered our event, because whenever anything touches the banana, it's going to trigger that function. And hit is now equal to that part. It's the part object. So we're saying, okay, the part, which is hit, dot parent. Well, the parent of the part is workspace, so this is already going wrong. And workspace has no property called humanoid, and there's not even a part in the workspace called humanoid either. So it's got confused. And obviously, when we're doing a touched event and we want to change a property of a player, and something else that isn't a player or a player's body part touches the banana, it's going to cause an error. It's going to break our script. So how do we only make this work for players in the game? Well, you'd have to do an if statement to check that, and I don't think we've covered if statements yet, but it's something that we're going to go into detail on in the future, but I'm just going to do one over here to show you. So we're going to say if, and then we're going to use a function of game.players to actually check if the part is a player. So we can say get player from character, and if it is a player and it's their body part that has touched the banana, then they're going to have a parent of that body part. So hit dot parent, then, and do an end. Okay, so this is just giving you a little bit of a preview into if statements. So when we're calling this inbuilt function, which was what we did in the previous video, an inbuilt function on the player service, get player from character, if we pass the player model, so in this case it will be hit.parent, if it is a body part, say a left foot, then the parent of that will be AlvinBlox, the player model. Then this function is going to check if it is actually a player in the game, and if it is, then this condition will be true, and the if statement will allow the code inside of it to run. If it's not true, then it's not going to run this line of code, and then it's not going to error. Because if we think about the part touching the banana, if hit.parent is then the workspace, because the parent of this part is the workspace, and we pass workspace to this function is going to find out whether the player's character model is actually a player in the game. So workspace is not a player model, it's not a character model, and it is not a player in the game. So it's not going to allow that code to run. What it does is basically takes a model or an object, it sees if it's an actual character model of a player in the game, because in the game, this is getting slightly off topic now, I'm sorry. Because basically when you have a player in the game, you have their player in game.players, but you also have their player's character in game.workspace. This is their character, this is their player. So what we can do is we can check to see if this character belongs to an actual player in the game. And when we say get player from character, it's seeing if a character model belongs to an actual player, or an object if it belongs to a player. If we pass something that isn't a player, such as this part or its parent, we say hit.parent because if it was a body part, such as left foot, then its parent would be the player's model. But if it's the part, then that part's parent would be workspace, and then workspace wouldn't be a player. It wouldn't be a character, and so there wouldn't be a player in the game. So it wouldn't allow this line of code to run unless there was a player, unless that character belonged to an actual player. So if we were to drop the part on the banana again, it wouldn't error, because yes, the touched event has run, and yes, if we print out hit.name, it's still going to print out part, but it's got to this if statement, and it said, okay, hit.parent, oh, that's workspace, let's try and get that player, see if it's a player from its character, and the character being hit.parent, and then it's figured out that it's not, so it's not run this line of code. But you can see how a touched event will run if anything touches the part, regardless of whether it's a player, whether it's a part that's not in the player, whether it's a hat, whether it's the base plate, etc. If I was to drop this banana on the base plate, you would get the same issue. It's anchored at the minute, let's unanchor it. Boom, base plate. So you can see, regardless of what it touches, it still runs the function, but you have to implement checks to make sure that it's touching the thing that you want it to touch. The hit argument is automatically passed to our function. It's automatically passed by the event. Every event has its own event data that gets passed to the event, and you have to check each event to see what its event data is. Aha! In this event, ancestry changed. You don't need to know what it does, but you can see it has two arguments, the child and the parent. So these are both objects. So if you were going to pass, if the script was passing two objects to this event function, you would have to put them in order. The child object would go first, the parent object would go second. So you would have your child object, you'd have your parent object, like that. Obviously you can name them whatever you want, but it's the order. You could get them mixed up, you could say parent object and child object, but because this is the first argument, the parent object would actually be the child one, and the child one would actually be the parent one, because you have not put them in the right order. You have to put them in the order that you are told to, but you can call the arguments whatever you want. It's just the data that gets passed to them will be passed in order, okay? So with our touched event, you only have one argument. If you have two arguments, hit 2, well, hit 2 is not going to be equal to anything because it doesn't get passed. Nothing gets passed to the function because touched event only passes one argument. It's told us only passes one argument. So if we were to print hit2.name, hit2 is going to be nil. It's going to cause an error. Let me show you that. It's anchored. Let me just unanchor the banana. Boom. Attempt to index local hit2, a nil value. When it is a nil value, it is equal to nothing. Nothing is set to it. So what's happened is, if we print out what hit.name is, okay, run the game, boom, it's printed. Actually, it won't have printed because we've printed hit2 first, and it's going to error, and it won't run the rest of the script. But if we print out hit first, hit will get printed as base plate, but then it tries to move on to the next line, printing hit2, but hit2 is not equal to anything because nothing got passed to that argument in the function. Only one thing got passed to hit because it passes data to the first argument, and in this case there was only one argument. You could switch it round. You could make the first argument hit2 and the second one called hit, and then you could print hit, but hit is going to be nil now because I said before, it doesn't matter what you call them, the first argument will get passed to the first one here. So because we've only got one argument that gets passed to the touched event, and if we put hit2 first, well, it's the first argument, so that's the one that the data is going to get passed to, and there's nothing for this. There's no second argument, so hit is nothing. So it all depends on the order of your argument. Doesn't matter what they're called, we just call it hit because that's the standard, what people call it. I could call it part that touched it, but then I'd have to replace hit over here, and it would do the same thing. If I play the game, it would still slip me over. It would still trip me up. Boom. Doesn't matter what you call your arguments, it just matters the order you put them in if you have more than one argument. So, wow, 50 minutes long, but this was such a good tutorial, I think. It's taught a lot to you. Basically in Roblox, we can set up event listeners that are always watching, always listening in your game, always waiting for something to happen. In this case, we have referenced the object that we want to apply an event to. We have got the name of the event from the object browser, touched. Remember, there are only a certain number of events. We cannot create events, only Roblox can, and they tell us which events we can use in the object browser. They are the ones with the lightning bolts. We then say the name of the event, and then the script will start listing out for that event to happen. But when the event does happen, when it gets fired, when you do step on that banana, how do we tell the script what we want to happen? Well, we have to connect the event to a function that will be able to run code that we want to run when we step on the banana. So we say :connect. We then open up brackets so we can put our function inside to tell it the function that we want to trigger. The function can be a predefined one that we can access by giving its name, or it can be an anonymous one that we just create on the fly in the connect, one that we only want to use for this connect function. I always do my events like this. I always set them up like this with my function in here. I don't bother with predefined functions unless I'm calling that function somewhere else for another purpose. If I would say 99% of the time you're going to do your events like this. So you've got the name of the event, you've got the object that event is being applied to. So the touched event is being applied to this banana. You don't have to say game.workspace.banana. You could say script.parent in this case, because the script is inside the banana. If you took the script out of the banana, that would not work. That only works because it is another way that you can reference the banana. So you firstly get it, you reference it, and then you get the event name that you want, you connect it, and then you put your function in there. You get it, connect it, and don't forget to end it, okay? So, wow, that was such a long video on events in Roblox. If you enjoyed this video, please do leave it a like. It took me quite a while to make. Got more videos coming on events soon because there are loads of events that we haven't covered yet. Touch is just the easiest event I can tell you about. If you didn't understand that get player from character or if statement stuff, do not worry, we'll be covering if statements in the future. What if statements do though is they just allow you to check something to make sure that your code only works for certain conditions. In this case we only wanted the code to run if the thing that touched it was a member of a player object, just to prevent other things like parts that weren't in a player from triggering it and causing errors. So that is the end of this video. Please share the video with anybody you know who will benefit from this. Share it with your friends, share the knowledge, and it really helps my channel out as well. Please use code StarCode AlvinBlox when buying Robux or Premium on the Roblox website. That is StarCode AlvinBlox. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment with any questions you have. I'll try to answer them in an upcoming video. Thank you for watching. And if you want to go to the next one, you can click on the thumbnail on the right side of your screen. If you want to subscribe to the channel, you can click on the AlvinBlox logo in the middle of the screen. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.